So we have our next, the keynote speakers, and I have, as Eric raised his hand and stood up, I'm delighted to introduce Dr. Eric Flamholtz and Dr. Yvonne Randle. They are here from Los Angeles to share their experience and their expertise and their years of work in the area of the entrepreneurship, family business, and leadership. Eric and Yvonne are President and Executive Vice President of Management System Consulting, a firm founded by Eric in 1978. The firm has helped numerous iconic American companies to grow and succeed, including companies like Starbucks, IBM, Baskin-Robbins, and many others, and you're going to hear more about some of those examples. Eric is known as organizational and individual effectiveness guru, as well pioneer in the field of human resource accounting. He's a professor emeritus at the UCLA Anderson School of Management, where Yvonne is also a faculty. We are proud to call Eric as one of our own. For those of you who were there last year at Distinguished Alumni Awards dinner night, you might remember that we recognized Eric as our distinguished alum. He has earned his MBA from Olin Business School before going further to get his PhD from University of Michigan. Both Eric and Yvonne have been very generous supporters of Olin, including endowing an Eric G. Flamholtz scholarship. They're the keynote speaker today. I can keep on going about their accomplishment and their bio, but then I end up taking all the time. Their detailed bio is in your packet. But their most recent book, Building Family Business Champions, it was published just a few months back by the Stanford University Press, and I'm told now that it is available on Amazon. So it's like last night, the former First Lady, she said that, it will be good if you go and buy the book. And you know, Eric and Yvonne also, they live on the faculty salary. It's going to be good to go and buy their book. But I have read this book cover to cover, and I can tell you that coming again from the family business background myself, there are so many gems. There were times that I say, oh my God, I wish I had this book available to my father, to my grandfather, and to myself and my brother when we were there in the family business, long before I made the decision to come to academia. Would you please join me, our keynote speakers, Eric Flamholtz and Yvonne Randle.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Mahindra. It's a real pleasure for us to be here. I spent 2 wonderful years at Washington University. When I got my MBA, I learned how special a community St. Louis is. I've been reminded of that every time I've been back. It's a unique place in terms of the warmth of people and the welcoming, and this is an extraordinary school. I've always said to people, my favorite educational experience has been at Washington University, so it's a great pleasure to be here, hopefully make a contribution to you. Yvonne and I will be sharing this presentation. The title is Building Family Business Champions, Building Sustainably Successful Family Businesses. Some of the things that the panel said, we would totally agree with, and you'll see that as we go through this. Our focus, my focus for the last pretty much 40 years has been on research on organizational success and failure, with the idea of coming up with practical methodologies and tools that can be used by companies at all sizes, small, medium, large, and giant, to become global champions, in effect, or champions within their space. And it turns out that 45% of our clients since 1978 have been family businesses. Some of them have been very small, like a husband and wife architecture firm. Some have been a little larger, 2 brothers and a father in an industrial abrasives firm. Some have been larger yet, Bell Carter Foods, which we'll talk about a little bit. They're a fourth generation successful family business firm. Gojo, which you may know by a different name, Purell. They're a large company, and giant companies like Simon Properties is a client of ours. David Simon, we brought him in when I worked with Mellon Herb Simon, and also Westfield. So we work with small, medium, large, and giant family firms, and we've been studying the lessons of success and failure and try to formulate that and put it into frameworks that we'll share with you. So with that, we want to talk about some family business challenges that have. You probably know something like this, but only 13% of family businesses last through the third generation. So when you have a family business that lasts through 2 generations, G2, we consider that a family business champion. When one lasts through 3 or 4, actually 4 generations, we consider that a family business dynasty. And there are a few of those. And we saw one today, going back even further, 6 generations. So even fewer firms last through the 3rd generation. A couple of examples are Heineken, which basically is a 4th generation family business founded in Holland, still very successful. Bank Santander, which is actually having some difficulty right now. That's in a 4th generation. Those 2 are dynasties. And Bell Carter Foods, which is a client of ours for 22 years. I began some work with them, and Yvonne's continued for about 22 years. And they are actually the anchor client we describe in the book. We went to Tim and Judd Carter at one point and said, we're writing 2 books, one about the great successes of business and one about the great failures, and we'd like to have you as a case study. And Tim said, sure. And they said, which book will we be in? So he said, we'll have to think about it a little bit. Okay. So a key question is, what can be done to increase the probability of long-term success and become a family business champion which lasts for multiple generations? Essentially the theme of this symposium as well. There are 4 purposes of our discussion today. One is to provide an overview of how to build a sustainably successful family business, or what we define as a family business champion. Some of you are, by definition, have met those criteria. Sometimes, however, people have done it, but they don't step back from it and think about it conceptually and analytically. And the problem is, if you don't understand what you've really done and how you've got there, it's very difficult to make adjustments when the environment changes or to transfer to a different generation. So the analytic piece, the conceptual piece, is really worth something. Even though someone has done it, they've built it, and they haven't thought about how they did it, and they try to explain it. They may not explain all the right aspects of it. So we've been looking at it from that kind of perspective, and the academic training has helped us. But everything we do, we want to be very user-friendly and very practical. The second thing we're going to do is provide you with a framework for assessing the extent to which your family business is positioned for long-term success. Now, some people actually completed an online questionnaire, a family business success survey, and you will get your report. It's a confidential report. When you go out at the registration desk, they have it. Not everyone did. For those who didn't, who wish to do it, if you'll give us a business card, we'll process it for you and send it to you. And we all will get a copy of the framework for understanding the report for the assessment of your business, of whether you are positioned for long-term success or not. We're going to show you 4 different types of family businesses, and you can guess which one you are, and you can see which ones are likely to be successful and which ones are likely to perhaps experience difficulty and failure. The 4th thing is provide an overview of some tools that can be used to promote sustainable family business success. Now, we have a limited amount of time. I've chosen to speak rapidly. I could try to skip every 3rd word, but I figured let me speak a little rapidly, and hopefully you'll process along with me. Skipping every 3rd may be a challenge for me and for you, so that's what we're going to do. But we have a limited amount of time. So our perspective, I want to share with you our perspective on a family business. It's a little different, pretty much from most other perspectives. Our firm, founded in 1978, has 38 years of experience in working with family businesses. As I mentioned, 45% of our clients have been family businesses. We've had the opportunity to work for a number of family businesses in depth over many years. The longest, I think, is probably Bell Carter, 22, 23 years. But many others have been also long periods of time, 9, 10, 15 years. And as we mentioned here, one of our clients is actually, we're still working with them, is Bell Carter, and they are a 4th generation family business firm. They're a family business dynasty in our language. In addition to helping our clientele, we were able to do participant observer research. It's kind of like an anthropologist who goes to, Margaret Mead goes to the Western Pacific and observes what's going on and then writes about it. So we're there helping a company, but we're also taking notes and listening and observing. And then we go back and look at our notes. It's a vertical analysis when you're looking at the company, but it's a horizontal analysis when you look across companies. And we've gotten many insights from looking across companies to see what's similar and what's different, and that's where we led to some notions. So we know that one of the issues that people have is what's a family business? We have a simple definition. It's one where at least two family members own and or work in the same business. Because you can have publicly held companies where, in effect, you have one or more members of a family working in it, and even though it's publicly held, it can have many characteristics of a family business. I was on the board of directors of 99-cent only stores for 9 years. They had gone public, and yet the Gold Schiffer family treated it in many ways as though it was still a family business. A family business champion is a business that has undergone at least two successful leadership transitions from one generation to the next. And a dynasty is one that's been in successful operation for at least 4. A very small percentage of firms reach that criterion. So to reach 6 is extraordinary. So we want to share with you the key aspects of our framework for understanding and managing family business success. Now recognize we're going to give you the highlights. If we had 7 hours, we'd give you obviously in-depth analysis of it. So the existing research and theory, when you look at it, and I have, most of the literature on family business success is focused on family characteristics and family dynamics, both within and outside the business. They tend to ignore the business aspects that are necessary to make a family business successful. What we've tried to do, we've tried to do is strike a balance and focus on the things that the business has to do and the things the family has to do in relation to business, and created some concepts that are relevant there. So sometimes they also focus on the characteristics of the business as it exists apart from the family, but not very often. So our approach is, as I say, different. We want to understand family business success based upon our perspective, which is rather than focus only on the characteristics and attributes of a family business per se, our work and research says there are 2 key dimensions of family business success that need to be recognized and managed. One of them is we call organizational or business development. You need to focus on the development of the business per se, almost as if it was independent of the family. There is the family's in it, and we have to take that into account, but you have to focus on that. So that's one aspect. We call that organization or business development. The second notion we call is family functionality. You have some families that are functional, positive families with a positive culture. Culture was mentioned before. Some families are actually toxic, and there's a whole continuum. It goes from highly functional to somewhat dysfunctional to very dysfunctional to truly toxic. And we have a chapter in the book called The Dark Side of Family Business. It starts with family business drama, and it goes up with different syndromes. We go as far as extortion and theft, but we have nothing on murder. It's not. I won't say to you with 100% confidence that there's never been a murder in a family business we've been involved in, but we're not aware of one. So if you want to subpoena me, I don't think I could tell you where the body was buried. People have disappeared. But I don't think that necessarily is murder. It might have been a fishing expedition. I'm not really sure. So basically, our approach is also consistent with some additional research by other people, notably some researchers out of Europe. So our family business success formula really looks like this. There's a degree of organizational development. We have a model for organization development that we don't have time to go into great depth here, but it's a 6-variable model. The market you choose to compete in, the product and service you offer, the resources you have and how you manage them, your operational systems, your management systems, and your culture, and how they fit together. And there's also an invisible business foundation. That's an organization development model which we've treated in a book called Growing Pains. That's been our core book. It's in the 5th generation. It was also published in 2016, the 5th generation of that book. So that's that model, and we describe that in this book in a different way. Then the second factor is the degree of family functionality. With this symbol here is to show there are really 6 factors of family functionality. So if you manage organization development plus family functionality well, then you get a high degree of family business effectiveness and success. If, however, you mismanage either the organization development aspects or the family business aspects, or both, you get an increased likelihood of problems and even the likelihood of organizational failure. And some people have already shared up here. Bart, for example, that his family's business, disappeared. So the relationship between 2 family business success factors and family business success is what's explained in this simple model. By the way, we will give you an opportunity for questions, but we'd rather you do the questions at the end, because we'll do the same approach that was done before. We may actually answer some of your questions as you see some of the additional slides. So each one of those variables, organizational development and family functionality. Organizational development refers to the systems, processes, and structure that support effective and efficient operations and growth. Without these systems and structures in place, at that whole level, that pyramid, you're not going to have a high likelihood of sustained organizational success. We have empirical data on that. Another thing that differentiates, I think, something that we do from perhaps almost everyone else that I've seen. I don't want to say everyone else because there must be something out there I haven't read, but I haven't seen anyone else that's done this. We have done empirical research to validate our concepts and our models and our methods. Generally speaking, you should ask a speaker or an author, what's the validation source? Have they done the validation work? Because most of the time they have not. It's their opinion. An opinion is useful, it's interesting, and you look at it for face validity. But empirical validity is better than face validity. And we look at the validation in terms of the impact of increasing shareholder value and dimensions of that sort. And we publish in what's called referee journals. It's classic academic technique. The second dimension is family functionality. It refers to the way the family members work with each other and other people within the business. The family dynamics with each other in the family, because the business is just another arena in which the family plays out its normal dynamics. And then, of course, how the family interacts with other people in that realm. This is the pyramid framework. We believe that it's a template you should use for building a successful organization. You first have any construction person, we have some here, know you must start with the foundation. Once you have the foundation in place for building, then you can build the structure on top of it. And Howard Schultz, who's the founder of Starbucks, said, if you want to build a 100-story building, you have to have a strong foundation. He understood that intuitively from day one. So when he was building Starbucks, even though it was very, very small, he had in mind that he wanted to build a billion or multi-billion-dollar company. And so from day one, he was hiring the kinds of people that would help him go to $1 billion. He then brought us in. He read our second edition of our Growing Pains book and invited me to come up to Seattle and work with them to apply our methodologies and tools. And we did that for 4.5 years and helped Starbucks grow from $165 million in revenue to $2 billion, to over $2 billion in revenue. And during that period, they continued to grow their revenue, they continued to be profitable, and they continued to enhance their infrastructure. So it was we called it guns, butter, and entertainment. You know, economists talk about guns or butter. We said, no, we want guns, we want butter, and we want entertainment. We want growth, we want profitability, and we want the infrastructure. So once you have that foundation in place, which is 3 concepts, a business definition is who are we? It's an identity statement. What's our business purpose? A strategic mission is not a philosophical mission. Philosophical mission would be, if you're a bank, we help people achieve the dream of home ownership. A strategic mission is something you want to achieve over a defined period of time. For Starbucks, what it was in 1994 is, by the year 2000, we want to be the leading brand of specialty retail coffee in the United States. We want to be everywhere, and we want to be able to defend ourselves against Nestle, Movenpick, McDonald's, or anybody else. That was the strategic mission. It was not an end in itself to get to $2 billion. It was a means to an end, because $2 billion meant 2,000 stores. Each Starbucks store, on the average, is $1 million in revenue. Some are 600,000, some 1.4. But on the average, it's $1 million. So we felt if we had 2,000 stores, we could defend ourselves against anyone. And we knew we had pictures of McCoffees that were in Australia. And McDonald's could have rolled out 500 stores. Starbucks had never rolled out more than 35. We had to build up the capacity to open 360 stores a year. Actually, we're going for 366, but basically 360 stores was sort of the published number. So once you have that, then the next thing is our core strategy. What is a core strategy? Most companies have strategies. They do not have a core strategy. A core strategy is a central theme around which all other strategies are developed. So with Starbucks, the idea was we're going to redefine the nature of the coffee cafe and be everywhere. We're going to be ubiquitous. We're going to make the assumption the average American won't walk more than 2 blocks for anything. And therefore, we don't mind if we're across the street from each other and be cannibalistic, because we don't want Pete's to open a Gloria Jean's. We'd rather have a Starbucks. We'd rather compete with our own stores than someone else's stores. And all Starbucks stores in the United States, with the exception of a small number that Magic Johnson owned, they were all owned by Starbucks. There was no franchising. So it didn't matter. Basically, if we cannibalized one store with another, it just meant more money was coming to Starbucks. It might be as much as return on investment, but it was going to be good from a competitive standpoint. So that's the core strategy. So then from that, what markets do you go into? What products and services do you have, and how do you provide them? Once you get to that level, now for the top 4 variables, we call the infrastructure of the business. The infrastructure is the systems and support processes that help you build an organization and manage it and grow. So it's basically the resources and resource management, the operational systems, all the day-to-day systems, the management systems, the planning system, the organizational structure, the management development system, and the performance management system, and finally, at the apex, the corporate culture. And corporate culture was discussed by some of the panelists. So that's the template. We use that for strategic planning, strategic organization development. We use it for competitive analysis. Classic strategic planning is only focusing here. We believe that there's a fundamental mistake, and that you ultimately win with infrastructure. We don't have the time to go into all of that. In Q&A, we can try to answer that, but essentially, you win with infrastructure. Take Walmart versus Kmart. They got the same products, yet Walmart's very successful. Kmart has gone bankrupt. It's now come back, but it's gone bankrupt. Why did that happen? It did not happen based on product. It happened based on management and management systems and infrastructure. So our research results has shown that as much as 75% of gross margin is explained by the pyramid, as much as 55% of EBIT is explained by the pyramid, and as much as 20% of ROI is explained by the pyramid. Now, I originally had an accounting background before I switched at the University of Michigan to the Institute for Social Research, so I'm very comfortable both in financial accounting terms. I taught accounting at Columbia, UCLA, Michigan, but I'm also very comfortable in organizational behavior. And so I switched when I got to Michigan to study these things. But I always evaluate these methodologies in terms that are impact on shareholder value, measured in these kinds of terms. Now, no research is perfect, and my research is not perfect, but it's all consistent. We've never had a study to date, either in the U.S. or China or Europe, that has contradicted the fundamental findings. That basically the pyramid explains a lot of gross margin, EBIT, and ROI. Not all of it, but a great deal, and statistically significant. So you can evaluate your pyramid by a simple way to do it. We have a survey that we use, a validated survey. Rusty Keeley was up there, and he's given me permission. I don't like to talk about a client unless we have permission, but Rusty has said you can refer to us. We ran our growing pains and our organizational effective survey for Rusty, and we did a session on Tuesday for approximately 70 members of his leadership team, giving them feedback on Keeley Holdings plus their 3 companies. And they got feedback on the extent to which they're experiencing growing pains, or where their strengths are, where the limitations are. But we use our validated survey. But you can simply use a 5-point method as a rough thumb method, and simply say, okay, how strong is our market position on 1 to 5 basis, where 5 is high and 1 is low. Same thing for the other variables. And then you come up with an average score. So you get a score of 1 to 5 for each one of these 6 variables. You average that again, and then you get a score, and you'll see basically that different scores mean different levels of likely success. I'm going to turn this over to, we'll show that later, but I'll show this over to Yvonne, who's going to talk about family functionality.
Okay, so actually what I'm going to do is talk about the second dimension, family functionality, and then we're going to talk about the survey results, because it's kind of interesting to see how the 2 dimensions come together. So Eric's talked about the organizational development dimension. This dimension relates to how functional the family dynamics are as they exist within the business. So you can have a functional family and you can have a dysfunctional family. And there are 6 dimensions to family functionality. So the first is treatment of family members within the business. So are they treated equally? Is there a high level of trust? Are some family members treated in one way and others treated in another way? The second is treatment of non-family members. So a highly functional family dynamics would be a situation where some of the panelists talked about this, where non-family members actually become part of the family and are embraced versus being treated very differently. The third is expectations of performance and accountability within the family. So what are people held accountable for? What are the expectations of performance that we have? And again, the panelists talked about looking for the right person to fit in the right slot. So that's a highly functional family. Family rewards and recognition. Are people rewarded just because they're members of the family, or are they rewarded based on what they do? I've got a client right now that I'm starting to work with. It's siblings. It's 3 siblings, 2 brothers and a sister, And they are having some issues right now because one of the family members, one of the oldest brother, he kind of is more of a country club type guy. And he sort of views his role as going out and dealing with customers, but he's really not putting in the hours of the other two. So they're talking about how do we work that in terms of compensation for our family members. Willingness of the family to learn and change, very, very important. With respect to the pyramid of organizational development, if you have a family that's not willing to grow and change and learn, and I think you heard from the panelists this morning that all of them were very willing and open to learning and continuous improvement, you can't really manage the pyramid to a great extent. And then the final is family and company leadership. So how does the leader operate within the business? If it's the leader of the family and the leader of the business, does that family leadership role transition into the business environment where it's dad or mom or grandma or grandpa in the business versus I am the CEO of the company and I'm managing the business as a business? So the two factors come together, as Eric showed you before, into this formula. And what ends up happening as you bring the pyramid of organizational development together with the family functionality, it determines your level of success. And we've identified 4 different types of family businesses. So the first are superstars. These are highly functional families that have well-developed organizational infrastructure. They've developed the pyramid that Eric showed you to the extent that they should. High potentials are functional families, so they bring with them very functional dynamics into the business. They have a strong family culture that is very functional, but they haven't yet developed the infrastructure that they need. So we mentioned Bell Carter Olive Company. They're a 100-year-old company, now transitioned to the 4th generation of family leadership. In between the 3rd and the 4th, they had a non-family member because they didn't feel that the 4th generation was ready yet. When we first started working with them, highly functional family dynamics. There were 2 brothers who were running the business. They were the grandsons of the founder. Very functional, but their infrastructure, that pyramid, was not developed to the extent that it needed to be. They didn't do formal strategic planning. Their leadership development was sort of whatever happens. They weren't sure they were structured appropriately because they had just gotten the Lindsay brand of olives, and they were moving from a private label house brand to a branded company. They also weren't sure that they had an effective performance management system. But the family culture was very strong, and it gave them something. Feuding families are dysfunctional in terms of the family dynamics, but they have a well-developed infrastructure. So their challenge is, how do we increase family functionality? And then sinking ships are sort of the worst of all possible worlds: dysfunctional family dynamics in the business and an underdeveloped infrastructure. So sinking ships don't have a whole lot of time to turn it around. And frequently what happens with sinking ships is they sell the business, or the business goes out of business itself. I mean, it fails. All right, so we gave those of you that took the Family Business Champions survey, and Eric mentioned if you did not and you want to leave us your card, and we'll be sure that you're able to do that. We want to share with you some results so you can see what this looks like. So what the Family Business Champions survey does is it assesses both the pyramid of organizational development, so the degree of organizational development, and it assesses the level of family functionality. So 2 parts. And then it actually will position you as one of the 4 types or somewhere in between. And we're going to show you the plot of that at the end. And Eric and I will both talk about our observations there. So the scoring's on a classic Likert type scale, from to a very slight extent to a very great extent. So you're scoring both of those dimensions, 1 to 5. And then we color code the scores, so you're able to see this. And I'll show you what this means in a minute. But basically, if you're over 4, we're looking now at the organizational development dimension. I'll show you family functionality in a minute. If you're over 4, it's fairly well developed in terms of the pyramid. You've got what you need. If you're in the green zone, it's very well developed, and you're getting some tremendous advantages from that. If you're below 4, then you've got some opportunities to improve. And if you're between 1 and 2, you've got very significant opportunities to improve. Your business is potentially suffering because you have not developed what you need in terms of your organization's systems, processes, structure, and so on, using the pyramid as a lens. We have come up with a look at what does it take to be a champion, a champion company. So you can see the color coding here, going from likely to be in crisis to unsuccessful, marginally successful, sustainably successful, potential champions, and business champions. So the goal here is to become a business champion, or at a minimum to become sustainably successful. So these are the results. 30 people from the group here completed the survey, and this is looking only at the organizational development dimension. We'll bring the others together in a moment. And you can see overall it's 3.4. So you are, if we back this up for a minute, you are marginally successful overall, the 30 that took it. And the most underdeveloped of the dimensions are products and services. So having the right products and services to meet customer needs, resources and resource management, having enough of the right resources, people, technology, dollars, facilities, and so on, and then management systems. Management systems is about the systems you have in place to manage your business long-term, planning, structure, performance management, and leadership development. So Eric, any observations you want to make on this before I move?
No.
Okay. All right. This is the frequency distribution, again, for those 30 people that completed the survey. So it's based on what we see here. You can see overall there's 27% in the red zone, 3% in the purple, 3% in the green. The majority sitting in the yellow and the orange zone.
Here I would make a comment.
Okay.
Our database shows that usually there's 10% in the yellow and green together. So this group is giving itself a score that's disproportionately higher. So you're more talented. Obviously, your affiliation with Washington University has, either through your degree or osmosis, has made you smarter and more successful, probably better looking, and so on. And therefore, you're getting these high scores.
Okay. All right. So now
assuming they're valid.
Now we're going to look at family functionality. You can see it's the same scale. That basically, if where you want to be are the potential champions over 4. And at a minimum, you'd like to be sustainably successful. These are the scores for this group. You can see that they're actually quite high. When you look across the various dimensions, it's a lot of 3.8 overall, a lot of 3.8 and 3.9. The lowest being treatment of non-family members and family and company leadership, but still over 3.5. So what this, and I'll show you the plot in just a minute, but what this suggests is that while the infrastructure, the systems processes structure, given the pyramid, is underdeveloped, the level of family functionality, family dynamics in the business may be helping to make up for some of that. All right, it's still not in the yellow zone though here, and the other scores are not in the yellow zone, which is at a minimum where you'd like to be.
It's also good news because the family dynamics are harder to change than the organizational aspects.
Yeah.
The organizational aspects are more technical. This gets to psychological dynamics and social dynamics, so it's harder to change. It can be done. We've done it, but it just takes longer and it's more delicate operation. Simple as that.
All right. So here's the frequency distribution again. You can see a lot in the green and the yellow. So you've got 43% sitting in the green and the yellow, which is where you'd ultimately want to be, and only 10% that's below 3. So very strong in terms of family functionality.
I would say anybody who's in the purple zone, run, don't walk to the hospital to get your heart checked out fast because you are in deep trouble. Data suggests that anybody who's in the red zone, a third of those fail within 18 months to 2 years. But if you're in the purple zone, it's worse than that. So that, I think, given the data, we're talking about one firm. So don't show your score to purple, don't wave it around, but take it seriously.
Okay. So now we're going to show you the plot. So these are the 30, the yellow, if you're counting, where you see the yellow up in the pure superstar. That's actually 2 data points. We just couldn't show it. So you can see the distribution of the 30 firms that completed the survey. We've got 5 firms that are pure superstars over there, which is very positive. And then we've got some that are sort of in between. We've got some that are borderline sinking ship over here. We've got one that's borderline high potential. So the message is, if I'm sitting anywhere other than the superstar area, I want to be thinking about how am I going to get there. And so this is plotting organizational development and family functionality. So if it's organizational development, it means working the pyramid. If it's family functionality, it means figuring out a way to manage family dynamics so that they don't interfere with what we need to do as a business. Any other observations?
Overall, it's a positive.
Yeah, very positive.
It's a positive, but the caveat would be we gave it to one person, and we usually do these at a firm like at Keeley. We had, I think, 70 people complete it. So it turns out that in statistics that when a sample, when n is greater than 10, the normal distribution approach, the distribution approach is the normal distribution. So what you usually need a minimum of 10, and ideally 20 is better than 10 and 30 is better than 20. You don't need 100% of the population, but one person is a tricky kind of a sample. Generally, it's hard to lose an argument to yourself. I know there are people who could probably do that, but generally speaking, most people don't lose an argument to themselves. So you just got to be a little wary about the validity of that one observation, particularly if you're patting yourself on the back. It's better than being down in that red or purple zone, but you want to consider the possibility that maybe you have rose-colored glasses on.
All right. So now I'm going to talk about tools for building family business champions. Eric and I are trying to be real sensitive to our time here, and then he's going to wrap it up with some lessons, some takeaway
lessons. And open for questions after that.
Yeah, of course. All right, so here are 4 tools that can be used to help build sustainably successful family businesses. So the first is strategic planning, and it's different in a family business than it is in a non-family business because you have to manage both the family side as well as the business side. So you have a family business plan that identifies pretty clearly what is it that you want to achieve with this business. So is it we're going to grow the business and then we're going to exit? Is it that we're going to turn it over to the next generation? So Bell Carter was very clear that they wanted the business to continue and made investments. And the family, some of the family members, and we can tell this story because we wrote about it in the book and they know, but some of the family members said, well, we know we're not going to make any money. And they had a family board, and some of the members of the family board were silent partners. They basically didn't have anything to do with the management of the company, but they said we're willing to invest because we want this to be an ongoing enterprise. Whereas this company that I'm starting to work with right now, that's a family business, they don't have another generation. And so they know, the brother and the 2 brothers and the sister, that at some point they're going to exit because they don't have another generation. And and they're pretty clear and they're consistent about what they want to achieve. Doesn't mean they don't have problems, but they're pretty clear about that. And then the second part of this is a strategic organizational development plan, which is about building that pyramid and making sure the pyramid's aligned with the size of the business that we're in. How do you do this? Well, you have to complete a SWOT analysis, and you're not, in this case, just looking at your business, but you got to look through that lens of family functionality at what's working and what's not in terms of the family. You've got to clearly define the business foundation that Eric talked about, and it has to be consistently agreed to by family members. So what business are we in? What are we trying to achieve long term? What's our core strategy? You have to then design the pyramid of organizational development that will support the what you want to be, not just what you are. And then finally, you have to develop objectives and goals for moving from where you are to where you want to be.
Just one additional comment, and that is most people think, well, we're doing strategic planning, but unless you're doing it this way, you're not doing what we're talking about.
Okay, so the second is structure and managing your structure. Again, what you have to be sure that you do here is manage both the family side and the business side. And so you're aligning your strategy with your structure. That's a key principle, that you want to design the way you look, given what it is you want to achieve. Clearly define roles and responsibilities. And so this is about the role in the business. And I think the panel they talked about this as well, getting clear, and then the roles on the family business leadership team. So for example, at Bell Carter, they had a family board, and they were very clear, and there's 2 sides to the family. The side that was not involved in the business, they were clear what their role was. They were advisors. They weren't going to tell management what to do. Those that were actually managing the business, and it's still that way, it was their decision. But they would consult with the other folks, and there was no conflict because it was very clear what the roles were. And it was very clear in the company what the roles were. And as they moved to the 4th generation, they progressed that leader, his name's Tim T. Carter, they progressed him through a series of experiences and were then very clear about what his role was in each of those. Align the informal and formal structure. That means align the way that things really work with the way it looks on paper, and then manage family functionality issues. Performance management system design. Establish clear goals for the organization as a whole and for each player on the team, including family members. And with all of these tools, you're managing the family functionality as well. Utilize an effective process for making day-to-day decisions and for managing work so that it's aligned with your goals. So that, again, means manage family functionality, because if you say this is what, as a company, this is what we want to achieve, and you've got family members that don't support it, you potentially could have some issues. Develop and use effective measurement systems that support the achievement of those goals and help you understand where you are. Evaluate performance based on established goals, and that means holding all people, including family members, accountable for results. So if we say these are your goals, we have to be sure that we're comfortable giving each other feedback, which goes to the reward aspect of family functionality. And establish and manage the reward system. That's sometimes pretty tricky in a family business, but it's figuring out if we're going to reward the family based on company profitability, what does that look like? And how do we reward them given what their roles are within the business? And then the final tool is culture management. So here, family functionality, the level of family functionality can have a pretty profound impact on your corporate culture because you're blending the personality of the family is really laying the foundation for culture. So here it's figuring out what should our corporate culture be as we look to the future in terms of what we want to achieve. And you've got to be sure that family members agree that this is what it should be and that they support it through their words and actions. Identify the current culture, and here you want to look at the company culture as well as the family culture, and identify aspects of the family culture that might be derailing you a little bit from what you want to achieve. Identify gaps, develop and implement a culture management program or plan. And here you want to also think about what's happening with family behavior. And that won't happen, the discussion of family behavior that's detracting from what you want to achieve won't happen in a larger team discussion. It's something that usually the family will take offline. And then monitor culture over time. Okay, Eric?
So we've had to skip a lot of the examples we would use to flush these out. For example, in succession planning, we have case studies of what you do with people who are not really prepared properly and so on. Because just for the time, we want to stick to the time. We're just going to finish a few more slides and then open it up for any questions you have. So here, I want to summarize. A key to successfully utilizing the family business management tools is to focus on creating what we call family business equilibrium. That's basically striking the right balance between the needs of the family and the needs of the business. On one end, you have businesses that basically everything's about the family, and the business is the golden goose, and they could kill the golden goose. On the other hand, you have examples of everything's about the business, and the family is cut off from that. I would say there is a right and wrong in the sense that if everything is about the business, about the family and not the business, you're going to destroy the business. And that was said by, I believe, by Tom as well. So what you're doing is you're trying to strike the correct balance between the family needs and the business's needs. And probably there should be a tilt toward the needs of the business for the long run. But we call that family business equilibrium. So now some lessons about creating a family business champion, 7 key lessons. Stepping back from the case studies and the companies we've worked with over 40 years, the family and the business must be viewed as distinct entities. If it gets confused, if you think of the family business, you've already made a mistake. It is a family business, but there's a family and there's a business. There needs to be planning for the family and planning for the business. And obviously the planning for the family, once you decide how you're going to utilize the business, it will infuse that. So the key to creating a family business champion is to treat the business as a business and the family as a family, and not to just mix the two totally. This involves keeping family roles and business roles separate and not allowing family and business needs to dominate the business. Again, that's what Tom said, and that's what we truly believe. That's what Bell Carter is a good example of. That's why they're the anchor case description throughout our book. Lesson number 2, successful family businesses are able to create family business equilibrium. They strike that balance. They basically, family business equilibrium is the optimum balance between the business needs and family needs. It's a judgmental thing, but they discuss it, they blend it, and they come up with a solution that's hopefully a win-win for the business and the family. Successful family businesses are able to create sustained family business equilibrium over the long term. The problem when you go from generation to generation is first generation, they're all about the business and they'll take care of the family. Second generation is a little different. Third generation is when the trouble starts. That's 13% of successful. But the fourth generation, there's not an exact number. It's around 5%, 4 or 5%. And by the fifth generation, you're talking about maybe 1%. So it's kind of the NCAA basketball tournament is a simulation of it with several rounds, each round being a generation long. So there is the idea is here that this is a family business culture issue that needs to be discussed. Lesson 3, family functionality. When you have a functional family, it's a intangible but real asset. When you have a Tim and Judd Carter who have a very positive functional culture, that is a tremendous asset. On the other hand, we had experience with two brothers who were sending the most vicious emails to each other. I mean, I won't even describe but profane language and "you're a moron." I think that was the mildest of the comments that were made, and so we were brought in. I was brought in as a sort of marriage counselor for the two brothers, and so I asked them, "Where were you when you were writing these emails?" "Oh, we have offices right next to each other." And everybody in the firm was being copied. It was just an absolute nightmare. It was the two brothers. They were 800-pound gorillas, and everybody else was afraid of a crossfire. You know, if you support Fred, Isaac's going to get you. Support Isaac, Fred's going to get you. So just lay low, don't make a decision, and stay out of the way. And that's just one example. There are others. So family functionality is a real asset. It's a prerequisite to successful business. While family business functionality is not in itself a guarantee, it's always a contributing factor to success, and as such, it is an asset, intangible asset of the enterprise. In the technical accounting sense, it's a part of goodwill and things of that sort. Where family functionality does not exist, the business is much less likely to succeed and rarely, if ever, will become a family business champion. It's conceivable that you get such a hot product which is patent protected to such an extent that the business can do well for a very long time while the family fights with itself. But eventually it's going to go down. Lesson 4, all of the classic management tools have a dual aspect. There's a technical aspect, planning, structure, performance management, culture management, and others. And basically they can't be used in isolation. You must take into account the family situation and the level of family functionality. So, for example, holding people accountable. You can't have a performance management system if there's a dual class system. If the family is the elite class and everybody else, the non-family members, are treated as second-class citizens, regardless of how they perform. If you're a family member, by divine right of DNA, you're going to get bonus no matter what, and other people are not, you're going to lose some very good people. We're going to have some very disgruntled people. So performance management and compensation, all sorts of other issues cannot be resolved unless you resolve the family issues to a reasonable extent. Lesson 5, successful families have some things in common. They usually have a strong business and strong family foundations. The family members may have a higher level of agreement about the business they're in and the role the business plays for the family, what they want to achieve with the business, and how they want to achieve it. That has to be discussed offline as a family first. Then that context goes into the business. It may not even be shared with the people in the business, but it has to be resolved. Otherwise, you get people fighting battles in the business in front of others, and they look like they're from different hymn books. They're playing different songs because basically they have different agendas. And we have in this chapter, The Dark Side of Family Business, we've seen examples of, for example, a mother who pitted two sons against each other, a father who literally sued his son, in effect, because his son was going to bypass the father in terms of success. I mean, there are some strange examples of behavior. So basically, you need to resolve those things offline. Another thing they have in common is an infrastructure that supports the current and anticipated future operations. Infrastructure is the key. If you're going to grow, you have the infrastructure, you're going to minimize growing pains. If you don't have the infrastructure, that's where you get growing pains. The third thing they have in common is a high level of family functionality. Family dynamics in the business promote rather than detract from effectively managing and growing the company. So those are the common things the family champions have. Lesson 6, a low degree of family functionality puts a business at risk. It doesn't matter how good the products are. It doesn't matter how good the customer relations are. Eventually, the battle that's going on between family members is going to put the business at risk. We've seen it again and again and again. And risk doesn't mean it's at risk. Many times it tips over into total failure. Sometimes it's sold. Sometimes it crashes. Other times we've seen it just blunted. We've seen one company go like a rocket past the family business because they were so busy fighting with themselves, they didn't put the energy into what they needed to do in the market. So they really missed a tremendous opportunity. And even when they saw the company go past them, they still could have been number 2 in the space, and they couldn't get their act together. So it's gone on for years. We're talking about over a decade. They're still fighting a battle. Lesson 7, formalized systems of management are required as a family business grows. During the early stages of family business development, the management process can be very informal. When you reach a certain critical size, a tipping point, if you will, the company needs to develop it needs to develop a more systematic, formal system management. We like to call that entrepreneurially oriented professional management. So there's a need for systems and procedures. It's like it's going from an invertebrate to a vertebrate. You can't be very large as an invertebrate. You have to have a vertebrae to be a mammal like an elephant or like a whale. So the same thing. You don't have systems and procedures, you are an invertebrate. When you need to scale, you have to have systems and procedures. So what do you do to create a roadmap for becoming a family business champion? Just a few things, and then we'll open for questions. 4 steps. 1, complete an organizational assessment. Basically, identify the strengths and limitations, degree of family functionality, and organization development. Where are you on this? What are you? Are you functional or dysfunctional? Or you have strong infrastructure, weak infrastructure? You have to know where you are and where you are positioned in the quadrant we showed. Create a separate a family business development plan. Clearly define and reach agreement on the family business concept, the strategic mission, the core strategy for the family. What does the family want to do? In effect, and then develop and reach agreement on steps to be taken to achieve the strategic mission, including building the appropriate infrastructure and addressing family functionality issues. Sometimes the solution is, for the Lowy family out of Australia, and they're also United States, Westfields, basically one of the 3 brothers, one brother is running United States, one brother is running Australia, the third brother is managing investments for the family. They're all happy, but there was no competition among them, but that had to be worked out. Step 3, execute the family business development plan. And step 4, monitor your progress in achieving the family business development plan and make adjustments if needed. So with that, we've really completed what we wanted to say here. And we have a final thought, but I'd like to open it up for any questions, and we'll give you our final comment. Yes?
I'd be interested in your data on the emergence of professional management in family businesses. And I guess
I got data.
Going to the champion side.
Right.
Is it? I would assume it'd be much more prevalent the receptiveness to professional management.
From families or non-families?
In family businesses, bringing in non-family professional management.
Okay, here's the data we have, which is actually in the book. We looked at our, we looked at our sample of companies, which is obviously not a random sample, because the companies that approach us, generally speaking, they're very good companies that want to get better. Okay, sometimes they're great companies. Sometimes they're failing. Small percentage are failing companies, and they don't know what to do. But basically, we broke them into the family business and non-family business, and ironically, the hypothesis would have been the family business are less sophisticated. There's no statistically significant difference. They're the same. They're the same. So in terms of receptivity to professional management, I don't have absolute data on that, but my guess would be based on that other data, it's essentially the same. Now, anecdotally, from working with companies since 1976, the firm was founded in 78, I would say that family, you get more examples of reluctance to become professionalized and bring in professional managers and turn over authority in family businesses than others. It's harder. And sometimes we have seen, and this is part of the dark side chapter, we have seen several CEOs, I'd say 80% male, 20% female, who literally wanted to destroy their firm because they didn't want to give it to the next generation. As shocking as that may be. I mean, in one case, one of the proudest things I did was a young woman, hired me as a consultant for her firm. She explained the situation, and she said, "My father doesn't believe that I have the capabilities to run the firm. He's destroying the firm. It's a ladies' garment manufacturer. He's buying inventory. We have enough inventory. It goes around the world 1.75 times. He's still buying. Someone takes him out to lunch. He buys $1 million worth of inventory." And the motivation, she believes, is he's angry at his wife and he wants to destroy the business. And she can't bring that up with him. Well, neither could I. But I could have conversations with him over the time where I could talk about the need for him. He had a responsibility to the 500 people who were working in his company and to his daughter and so on. And the second question was, well, can she do it? And the answer is, I'm coaching her. She can do it. She's smart. She went to Stanford. She went to Chicago for an LLB. She can do it. So he bought off on it. But I never confronted him and said, look, you're destroying your business. It would have ended the conversation. He would have said, no, I'm not, most likely. So twice I had to do the same thing. I had to work with someone and not confront the core issue. I had to do it indirectly. So the answer is, you do find, I think, more of that in a non-professionally managed, because basically the ownership, it ties in with ownership, whereas in a professionally managed firm where ownership is probably publicly held, it's not the same game. You do find people, imperial CEOs in public companies, no question. So you do have that issue. Other questions or comments? Yes.
Can you elaborate on what dynamics take place in the third generation that make it that difficult?
Sure. I mean, every society has the same kind of phrase. United States, it's it's rags to rags in 3 generations. In Hong Kong, it's my father drove a rickshaw, I drive a Mercedes, my son will drive a rickshaw. In Arabia, it's my father was a camel driver, I drive a Mercedes, my son will drive a camel. Okay, the first generation works and builds the business. The second generation has the values of the first generation. And not 100%, and maybe have some of the talent, maybe more talent. The third generation is good at spending. They enjoy the fruits. There's a song one of the songwriters wrote. In fact, you'll be spending your grandpa's inheritance on clothing and whatever. Some kind of a lyric in that. And basically, the third generation seems to have a sense of entitlement, lack of account. Now there are exceptions to everything. So clearly there are third generation firms that make it through and so on. But when you look at it, the root cause appears to be entitlement and accountability. That they need to be told before they're 5 years old, no at least once. They need to learn no means no, and there needs to be some sense of accountability, responsibility, and that there's not an unlimited amount of money. You're not being good to your children when whatever they ask for, you give it to them, and you give them more than they would have even asked for. So you build up that, and then they have no sense of responsibility. It's not their money. It's the whole thing of other people's money. Do you know, would not have been relevant directly. There's a 50% failure rate of firms within 5 years for people who start their own firm. There's a 70% failure rate when you're backed by venture capital. Why? Other people's money. If you didn't earn it, if you didn't make it, you don't have the same respect for it. So I think that there's a lot of those things that are going on. There are exceptions to those. That's why you get, now we've had to deal with we've been assigned over the years to work with a number of sons and daughters to get them ready to take over the firm. And we've had to hit them with some very difficult 360 evaluations to get their attention. We have one individual who we actually write about in the book because we have permission. And his name is Ryan Howley. And Ryan basically took over. He's president of Techmer, one of our clients, a $200 million company. It's in the succession planning chapter. And basically we had to hit Ryan one of the worst 360s we ever gave someone. And then he got better. And then he got worse again. When he became president, we had to hit him again. And he didn't like it. First time he embraced it. The second time he was not happy about it. But he's now changed again. He got his head screwed on straight. So basically, that to me is the core problem in most of those cases. If you dig deep enough. Yeah.
You described how family dysfunction can be distraction to business, right?
Right.
Can you describe how, on the other hand, you can use philanthropy to sort of knit together the objectives of the family and the objectives of the business?
Well, I think you just said it. I mean, you want to talk about Gojo? And Marcella and...
Well, we have and it's actually in the book too, so anything we share, we have permission to do it. But there is the family that owns Gojo, which produces they invented Purell, and they've now bought it back, and they're manufacturing it again. The two daughters of the kind of family, they would be the next generation technically.
Third generation.
They would be the next, but they would be the third. Their great uncle actually founded Gojo. The two daughters, and there's more children, but they are not interested in the business at all. So the two daughters have decided they do not want to manage. They're not going to be a leader at Gojo. They're not going to be CEO. One of them has an undergrad from Princeton and a Stanford MBA, and she and her sister have chosen to go into funding. Basically, they have a foundation and they manage the family foundation. And the family foundation doesn't just provide resources for nonprofits around the world. I mean, they really do things around the world. It also is managed so that if a family member wants to do something business-oriented, the family board, which consists of Marcella is the daughter I'm talking about, and her father and her siblings make the decision about how they want to allocate the resources that the family has that are primarily derived from, over the years, the profitability of Gojo, the mothership. So they've made a conscious decision to not go into the business, and the family's managing it accordingly. So they've got a CEO and they've got a COO, and they're doing succession planning within the business, but it does not count. And so that really, Marcella basically says that whole idea of doing something better, and she has a specific way she says it, but doing something better for the world makes a big difference for their family, and they're very committed to that.
Another example would be Fouad El-Hibri, basically from Lebanon, founded Emergent Biosolutions. His son is running the family foundation. He's not in the business. Doing a good job in the foundation, but he's not in the business. This new CEO was someone who came up through the ranks in the business. So you can use a foundation as a way to give someone something meaningful to do, but they don't have to interfere with the business. In Marcella's case, she didn't want it. And I think in terms of Fouad's son, he didn't want it either. Other questions or comments?
Okay. Eric, probably we should
we
cut
gotta
off
move.
the
Up to you.
questions and move to the final thoughts.
Yep.
Okay, so sorry about that. We'll be happy to talk with you informally at lunch. So final thoughts. The development of a family business champion is an ongoing, never-ending process. It's because family business champions are not perfect companies. As good as they are, they're not perfect. And the environment and the internal dynamics changes. A perfect company, like a unicorn, does not exist. It's a figment of imagination. Most of the family business champions would, like Bell Carter, which has been successful for more than 100 years, and Gojo, which has been successful for 3 generations, quite candidly state they have their problems. Bell Carter said, "Which book will we be in?" Or you really want to use this for a case, we might not be in business when the book comes out. I mean, to some extent, they actually believe that. To some extent, it's a joke, but it's not entirely a joke. They're wrong. But family business champions are able to identify and address their problems, and as a result, they get stronger and stronger. That's really the bottom line. They do that. So that's it. There's further reading you can do. Unfortunately, the only thing we've published on family business is in that book, but hey, you can probably get it in a library. So with that, thank you very much for listening, and I hope you found it some value.